Okay, well, thanks for coming. Really good to see you here. As I said, my name's Daniel Moore and I'm a psychiatrist. I work at the Warneford Hospital. I work in the psychosis team. If you develop a psychotic condition, you come to my team for 3 years and we do our best to care for you, get you to understand about your condition and hopefully see you back to primary care rather than ongoing mental health services. So that's a big passion of mine, psychosis. I go to St Andrews in North Oxford. That's the church I go to, but I live in Headington. And another passion of mine is this space between mental health or psychological thinking and faith. And I teach at Wycliffe Bible College. I teach the ordinands there about how perhaps to care for people in their churches who might have mental health problems and help give them a framework for thinking about that. So that's me. And I was really struck by this topic, peace of mind, because I don't know about you, but I struggle to get peace of mind a lot of the time. And I was sort of increasingly struck as I thought about it because, as I said, in the little intro that I spoke, Jesus seeks to give us peace, doesn't he? He wants to leave his peace with us. But I'm now thinking, goodness me, in my work I see a lot of people who struggle to achieve peace, and even though there's no major catastrophes other than my 3 children, creating mini catastrophes now and again, my life's reasonably stable, but where's the peace? So herein lies this talk. So life is stressful. I guess that's where we need to start. We've heard this morning about the inequalities of Oxford, and certainly I see the inequalities in my job regularly, and it's part of the reason I love the job actually. But yeah, 7% of people feel stressed every day, and 3/4 of people have felt so stressed that they've been overwhelmed or unable to cope. So stress is everywhere. You're not alone if you can't achieve peace of mind. What on earth is that? So stress is everywhere. And given what we're talking about today and what some of the things that has been mentioned this morning, I thought we could just for a few minutes, just break into 2s and 3s and think about what are the biggest causes of stress that we experience. What are the biggest causes of stress in for you, in your church, but in Oxford as well? What are the stresses in people's lives? Okay, and then we'll bring you back. So just a couple of minutes on that with the person sitting next to you. Okay, we'll bring you back in there. We just want we're going to bring you back in. You've probably got a couple of big headlines, big ideas. So perhaps people from over here, what are the biggest causes of stress that you think are around today? Over here, anybody want to shout out? Financial? School. Work, yeah, work stress, thank you, yeah. Anything from over there? Anything different? Relational stress, thank you, yeah. Any from over here? What are the biggest causes of stress?
It seems to me that as every year goes by, there's more and more change and more uncertainty in the society and the world we live in.
Yeah. Yes. So uncertainty, change, uncertainty. Yeah. Family. Yeah. Stress in the family. Over here, anything different?
Volume of work.
Volume of work. Your workload. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Expectations of work. Exam stress. Yeah. Pressures. Yeah.
Overstretched and under-resourced properly as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Illness, bereavement, someone dies, bereavement.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's one of my silly things that I say. If somebody says, how are you? I say overworked and underappreciated. So I'm fine. So yeah, here are some big causes of stress that I've sort of dug out. So housing, that's a major issue in Oxford, isn't it? So a third of 18 to 24-year-olds, a major stress for them. This is from the Mental Health Foundation, and it's about people who are seriously stressed or have mental health conditions. What is it that they're the major stressors that have perhaps contributed to their mental health? So yeah, a third of 18 to 24-year-olds, 1/5 of 45 to 54-year-olds is housing, 1 in 5 debt, which was mentioned here, wasn't it? A third, health conditions, self, friend, relative. Just over 10%, I like this one, feeling the need to respond to messages instantly. It's a bit of a pressure, isn't it? Who silenced their WhatsApp app? Oh, good man, there we are, well done. What about this? Over a third of women and 25% of men-ish, body image. Okay, body image is a major stress. About 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds is the comparison they make with others. How do I sit alongside others? The relativistic nature of our society is becoming increasingly powerful, and we have a redemptive message in that, don't we, as Christians? Comparison to others. And 60% for 18 to 24-year-olds, the pressure to succeed. I think somebody said here about exams and things like this. The pressure to succeed is immense. So there are stresses everywhere, and lots of people are stressed a lot of the time. So the next question, just for a few minutes for you guys, is where would you be and what would need to occur for you to experience ultimate peace? Just a couple of minutes. Okay, let's bring us all back then. Let's bring us back. A bit of an impossible question, that really, isn't it? Bit of an impossible question. I'm not going to force any responses, but if anyone would like to say anything that they thought might give them ultimate peace. Anyone? Go on, yeah.
Kind of said the obvious one, heaven.
Heaven, yes. Yeah, 10 points. 10 points for that answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then I said, can we actually expect ultimate peace in this broken world and on earth? Which is probably not the best way to think about it. And we had a wonderful example here, actually a hug from Jesus. Which offers that.
Great, yes, lovely, yeah. Anyone else?
There ain't no such thing on this earth.
Yes, okay, thank you, yeah. Well, let's explore that, shall we? I like this quote from Jim Carrey. I hope everyone could get rich and famous and will have everything they ever dreamed of so that they will know that it's not the answer. So is peace found in worldly riches? Jim Carrey says, no. A definition of peace in the Oxford Dictionary is an absence of conflict. But as we're kind of articulating now, conflict happens everywhere, on every level. So conflict happens, between cities, but within cities as well, and between churches, sadly. Within churches, perhaps even more sadly. It happens within family. It happens within ourselves. I don't know how many of you know Freud's model of the unconscious or of self, with the id, the ego, and the superego, and how there's constant conflict between the id, which is the animalistic nature in ourselves of wanting to satisfy our primal urges, and the superego, which is about the societal respectability part of knowledge, and the superego is pulling us that way, and the id is pulling us that way, and the ego needs to sit in the middle and resolve the conflict. And that's what therapy was aimed at, giving strength to the ego to sit above those two. So Freud posited that there's constant conflict within ourselves. And Jung talked about individuation. So the process of individuation is about recognizing that we have multiple inner selves. A modern understanding of that is perhaps different personality traits that pull us in different ways. So you might be a bit of a rebel, but also really passionate about other things, a bit studious, but also maybe a bit lazy, and you've got all these different traits that pull you in different ways. How can you sit above these traits and somehow cohere their antagonism, the inevitable antagonism, to create and forge a way forward that you have chosen? That's individuation. And Jung talks about the shadow self, the hidden self, part of yourself that is not acceptable, or you've deemed not to be acceptable, that you're always trying to hide, always trying to, sort of keep behind closed doors, that actually you need to accept. But in accepting the shadow self, what is the chaos that might ensue? So I've just chosen Freud and Jung as perhaps, godfathers of modern psychology or psychotherapy, just to show that they really said that, even if we get peace externally, an absence of conflict, perhaps the conflict continues internally. And that's not even going to places like chronic pain and mental health problems and terminal conditions, loneliness and grief, where there's a conflict between perhaps where you want to be and what you're experiencing, or the state of physical pain you're in and not being able to achieve anything, or not being able to go places or do the things or think the things that you used to be able to do or think. And so there's conflict in so many places. It's everywhere. Where's the peace? What about Jesus? Well, Jesus wasn't peaceful at all times, and actually was in frequent conflict, wasn't he? I mean, I just chucked up these things that just came to my head, actually, but you'll think of lots more examples of Jesus being in conflict with others, or perhaps with himself. So Jesus weeping at Lazarus's tomb, the Jesus wept, that verse, Jesus has wept, so powerful, isn't it? That conflict in him of just the desperate sadness. Why has my good friend died? And the get behind me, Satan, to Peter when Peter has articulated that Jesus is the Christ, and then Jesus says he's got to die. And then Peter says, no, you're not going to be that type of Messiah, And Jesus said, no, I am that type of Messiah. But that conflict, I wonder whether he responded so powerfully, because it was a conflict in Jesus, It's really something he needed to stand strong on. And he upturned the sellers in the temple, perhaps most famously, didn't he? Yeah, argued with the Pharisees, and the conflict inside himself of, your will, not mine, in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus didn't experience peace that often. At least not in peace in the terms of a worldly sense of peace, an absence of conflict. So if we're thinking of peace in those terms, Jesus didn't experience peace. So, is peace in this worldly sense, absence of conflict, achievable? And I think we need to just say and just state the fact that we all harbour a fantasy of peace. I don't know what yours is, but mine is, a beach, the sun, some beautiful waters, a nice bit of food on the barbecue that somebody else is cooking for me, and maybe a cool beer. That, but this is a fantasy. Or perhaps if we can achieve it, it's important rest that it's transitory. But it cannot be an end goal, because you're going to be swept up into something else. It's somewhere we can retreat to. But it should be a goal, this absence of conflict. Can we ever escape these ups and downs, this turmoil of this world? And as Paul articulated really well in Romans 7, I do what I don't want to do. Why can't I get away from this? And so perhaps it's unsurprising that Jesus says, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth, but a sword. And I think what Jesus is saying there is he's not come to bring worldly peace, this sense of absence of conflict to the world, which is what some people have said. Can we achieve worldly peace? Jesus didn't come to bring worldly peace, an absence of conflict in our lives. That's quite big, isn't it? Yeah? But we're all yearning for it, aren't we? You know? But he didn't come to bring it. But he did come to bring and give us peace. So what's that all about? A couple of quotes here that kind of sit in this space. Donald Walters, who's a bit of a guru. You will find peace not by trying to escape your problems, but by confronting them courageously. So peace isn't an absence of conflict, it's a confrontation. Peace is not in denial, but in victory. I like this one of Ronald Reagan's. Peace is not absence of conflict, it's the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. So let's just take check of where we are right now, which is that, being a Christian means to follow Jesus, to pick up our cross and follow him. Can we be peaceful under the weight of the cross? Can we be at peace when we suffer rejection, or when we engage in heartfelt, compassionate ways with those who experience rejection, or humiliation, or attack, or betrayal? So perhaps we need to kind of take a stock here and say, well, the peace of Christ surely cannot be worldly peace, as he said in Matthew 10. So perhaps this is a curious peace, a peace that is not the peace of our first supposition or our first heart yearning. John 14:27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." John 16, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." So in both those verses about peace, Jesus is saying peace, but also perhaps not worldly peace. It's curious. So perhaps for a little bit longer this time, what kind of peace could Jesus be talking about? Maybe 5 minutes? Okay, let's draw ourselves in now. If you could end your discussions, that would be great. So I'm going to ask perhaps a couple of people to give their views on this question. So in this area here, anyone got any ideas? No pressure.
I mentioned that sometimes there's an unusual peace that you can experience when walking through great uncertainty and deep pain, where even if you're like, I can't even say God's good, so it will be fine, but when you go, God's good, so God's good. And actually, whatever the outcome, God is good, and there's a peace that doesn't make sense in a situation like that.
That's great. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. Anyone else in this section? Want to have a go? No? Anything different?
I think trusting Jesus beyond whatever, that image of a perfect father-child relationship, a child will trust its parent completely. It's what against all odds, if you're trusting Christ for the outcome of everything, or trusting Father God.
Yes.
Then, if that's a full trust relationship, you find your peace there, because you know that He's got your back, or He's with you, regardless of the circumstances. So that's
Brilliant. Thank you. Great. Anyone here want to add anything different? No, perhaps not.
Yes, we had trust and reassurance, but then we had the shalom and the nature of shalom, and also grace bringing that
Yes.
peacefulness which
Yes.
has been described by Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
I think also sorting our unseen with the Lord, that distress of not being in relationship with the Lord, that brings the perfect peace. And
Brilliant.
that's the base for our work of salvation.
Absolutely, fantastic. Yeah, we'll be getting to covering these points. What you've said is just right on message. Thank you. So let's just reflect on living in God's peace. So peace that Christ is talking about, Jesus is talking about, does not prevent troubles, but gives us peace to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, fearing no evil. It doesn't take away the hurts or persecutions from others, but does enable us to forgive readily and completely. His peace does not provide material comfort or physical security, but brings content even in our poverty. That verse, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So the peace of Christ is perhaps turning the other cheek when you've been slapped, and perhaps most fundamentally has been said here actually in a number of different ways, surrendering our security to God alone. God is sovereign. My first attempt at articulating what God's peace might be is this. God's peace appears to be living amidst the troubles of this world. Yes, suffering. Yes, confused. Yes, but while maintaining an eternal perspective, the knowledge that God has given us the full assurance of salvation. And in 2 Corinthians 4:16 and 18, Paul talks about inwardly being renewed day by day. Our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory. So let's fix our eyes on what is seen, not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary and what is unseen is eternal. And so there's something about managing horizons here, and I talk about managing horizons in the clinical context, where if somebody's really, really struggling, they can't see to the end of the day. They certainly can't see to next week. They might just be able to see to the next hour. And it's a bit like running up a hill or cycling up the Big Headington Hill, as I'm going to do later. Don't look at the top. Just keep looking down there. And that's what you need to do if you're suffering. You do look down. But as Christians, we don't just look down. We also look to that distant horizon. I lift my eyes to the hills. Or as Paul says, we focus on what is unseen. Because there is our eternal home. And God's sovereign nature is promised to us. And I'll just share a journey I've gone on this. And you might have noticed my head. I had a fairly serious cancer about 4 years ago. And I had to manage my horizons a lot in that time. And God did not give me any assurances about these foothills and these marshes here. There was no assurance there. But God's sovereign nature gave me peace about the far distant horizon. And I needed to focus on that. And I needed to let go of these other things because God's peace was there for me. And if I took my eyes off there, I was lost. And there is a sense that we need to do that when we're suffering. But as Christians, we also do that. So in a sense, peace is knowledge. It's knowledge of God's promises to us.
So are you saying we have two horizons? Are you suggesting two horizons?
So, well, I'm just suggesting that, when you're suffering, when I was struggling with this, I was thinking, what am I going to do in the next hour or two? But I'm also looking up and seeing God's, it's today and that day, isn't it? Today and that day. Somebody can supply the Bible verse. So I'm going to go a bit deeper now. Okay, I'm going to press in a bit. Because why is the worldly peace considered experiential? Why do we reach for that experiential peace? I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl, Auschwitz survivor, psychiatrist, and talked about meaning therapy or logotherapy. And he said that you have peace when you actively live out your meaning. And he loved quoting this thing from Nietzsche: he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. So peace, according to Frankl, would be achieved when our present activities and our future plans align well with what gives us meaning. But the thing is that meaning comes from how we view our identity. And there are lots of different ways we can look at our identity. And there's definitely a sense that the way we view our identity in this culture is changing quite quickly, actually. And you can view your identity in terms of values, in terms of gender, in terms of job, in terms of family, in terms of culture, race, whatever, nationality. Charles Taylor is a philosopher who talks a lot about the social imaginary, and he talks about how we're in a place at the moment in culture where identity is viewed as being authentically most you by living out your emotional preferences. So to understand who I am, I need to deeply understand what it is I want and why I feel as I do. So it's very much an introspective, experiential identity. And I think that the nods in the head, people are understanding that's kind of how people see, I need to feel me. So I need to act that out in order to be me. Yeah. And Jean-Paul Sartre, the consummate sort of existential philosopher, talks about we are our thoughts and feelings and values. We are the totality of our experience. So there is a sense that lots of people's identity is about achieving some sort of a peace or harmony with their emotional preferences. And so it makes sense, therefore, that if our identity is based on experiential premises and or experiential grounds or emotional preference grounds, our meaning, the activities that give us meaning, is to gratify our emotional needs. And this very much chimes with Freud's will to pleasure principle. So, he talked a lot about, a lot of our conflicts are about not being able to gratify our senses. And therefore, it is perhaps of no surprise that when we think about peace, we think about it experientially. But we've seen that peace cannot be maintained using this paradigm. So very sadly, folks, if you view your identity as very much based on living out your emotional preferences, where's the peace? And perhaps we're seeing this around us today, this problem, the place where this view of identity gets us. God gives us a relational identity. We are children of God. We are the bride of Christ, relationships. We are the family of God. We are the body of Christ. What greater picture of a relationship can there be than being seen as a body? You don't define a finger by saying it's a lovely, pretty little thing with a nail on the end that's perhaps, very flexible but a bit oversensitive. No. A finger works with the hand to serve the body. It's defined how it serves and how it functions with the other parts. The two commandments Jesus gives us are relational, aren't they? So what should we do? Relate to God and relate to each other. Bring glory to me by showing out my love in relationships around you. And Jesus defined himself in relational terms. He defined, I am here to live out my Father's will. I've come here to do my Father's will. And we know, that actually the Trinity is one of those irreducible aspects of God. We know God through his relationship with himself within the Trinity. God is ultimately a relational God, and he's created this creation for relationship with us. So our meaning, therefore, is found in relating to God and others through serving, restoring, loving, accepting, forgiving, bringing God's kingdom in the spaces between. Who we are is how we are in our relationships. And what's interesting about those verses in John that I read out, about Jesus saying, peace I give to you. That peace, the Greek term, if anyone knows Greek, might know how to pronounce that word. Irene is my guess. I don't know. Has an emphasis on reconciliation in relationship. That word, that Greek term, peace, is about reconciliation in relationship. Isn't that interesting? Thomas Merton, an American Catholic, very wise man. We are not at peace with others because we are not at peace with ourselves. And we are not at peace with ourselves because we are not at peace with God. Great quote. On reflecting on peace and reading some of the gospel narratives, it's amazing how often Jesus says, peace be with you. Now, sure, that was probably just the standard term of, hey, peace be with you, thinking about goodbye. Goodbye means God be with you, doesn't it? And we don't realise we're saying God be with you when we say goodbye. Perhaps Jesus was saying peace be with you just because that's what you did. I wonder whether Jesus said peace be with you because this was Jesus sort of willing us, inviting us to live in harmony with God. And why was that so important to Jesus? Because that's why he was there. That's why he lived, so that he could give us that union with God. So him saying peace be with you was him saying, I'm here because I'm actually wanting to give you my peace. Because of what I'm going to do, you can have peace. You can have that assurance of your salvation because of me. So peace be with you. When Jesus is saying that, with the concept of biblical peace, becomes quite a transformative thing for Jesus to be saying, right? Peace be with you because of what I've done. And he says it after his resurrection, some of the resurrection narratives. Peace be with you. Wow, hallelujah. For Jesus to be saying that then to his disciples, you can have peace. And of course, in this context, any stressor from peace would be separation with God. So we're kind of getting to a bit more of an articulation of what biblical peace might be. I think we really need to reframe our view of peace away from an experiential view of peace. It perhaps is a bit of a fantasy. Perhaps it's a rest we can get to every now and again. An important rest, but it's an artificial rest sometimes because we've just had to, in Freudian terms, suppress all of our conflicts and say, I'll deal with them next Tuesday because I'm going to have some rest this weekend. So it's an artificial sense. It can only ever be transitory. And if you do magically somehow to manage to get peace, it's only going to ever be short-lived. We need to move away from that. Jesus did not come to bring peace, worldly peace to the world, but a sword. God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself because it is not there. There is no such thing. And this speaks into, C.S. Lewis saying that, speaks into that relational nature of peace. And that we receive peace in relationship with God. So this was kind of my second go at articulating what peace was. It's not just knowledge. It's not just that horizon looking. It's not just a fact that we have to hold on to. It's the living out of our meaning. Using Frankel's frame here. Peace is achieved living out our meaning. So what does that mean? Yes, peace is found in the knowledge that God is sovereign and that he's given us full assurance of our salvation. Nothing can separate us from him. There is peace there. That is knowledge-based. But peace is activity-based as well. It's living out this meaning relationally. Living out God's meaning for us to live in relationship with God, restoring godly relationships with others. Is this what shalom looks like? I want to leave you, and I'm going to read this slowly, a quote from Bonhoeffer, because the world is full of conflict. God has given us his peace. And as Jesus imparted peace and left peace with the disciples, we are called to be peace bringers. But what does that mean? And I think, yes, in some senses, it might be bringing experiential peace. And by the grace of God, some of us are given, short encounters with what heavenly peace is like through the grace of God in our encounters with Jesus. Yes, and that is wonderful to share. But I think Bonhoeffer articulates what it might mean to be peace bringers. So the followers of Christ have been called to peace. They must not only have peace, but make it. His disciples keep the peace by choosing to endure suffering themselves rather than inflict it on others. They maintain fellowship where others would break it off. They renounce hatred and wrong. In so doing, they overcome evil with good and establish the peace of God in the midst of a world of war and hate. So there is this sense that our actions, as it was the Ronald Reagan quote of, peace is not an absence of conflict, but a peaceful, trying to manage conflict peacefully, isn't it? So we're not trying to end conflict, guys. I mean, yes, we look to Jesus and end times for that, sure. But what we try to do is bring peace into conflict situations. We bring knowledge of the sovereign nature of God, and we bring what we know as godly relationship, and we look to restore that amidst the conflict that we see around us, and we bring that relationally, and we try and serve and see that peace as being restored in these spaces between, to some extent, despite all the conflicts that we have. So there is a knowledge and there is a living out. But perhaps at times there might be experiential through God's grace, but that might only ever be, fleeting. But we all look to those end times, as these guys said over here, when Jesus comes again. So, and we are at the end of this. So hopefully that's been a bit of a challenge, a bit of a juxtaposing, a bit of a challenge to these fantasies that we harbour about peace. And perhaps a bit of a challenge to think about, how do we bring peace to the city of Oxford? What does that look like? Does that mean ending all conflict, ending all injustice, or ending all, lack of equality? Or does that mean building relationships and living out relationships in our relationships, that sense of knowledge of God's peace in our hearts? Thanks.